Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm back today with another interesting tutorial for you guys. And in this one, I'm gonna show you how to make this amazing animation that's actually playing on your screens right now. And the reason behind making this tutorial is just to give you guys a better tools to actually make interesting trailers for your channels, right? Since a lot of you are YouTubers who are pretty much new and trying to make it out there, so I think a good trailer can really help you out. So yeah but before we get into that, a quick announcement that starting tomorrow I'm going to be starting a tutorial series where I'll be going over uh, all the modifiers that are there in Blender, and like or probably try and answer all your questions around how to use a modifier, why to use it, when to use it, and etc. Right? So uh, I hope that you guys like that series. There will be one video for each modifier, right? Just to make sure that we have plenty of time in going through detail and probably go through all the options and facilities that that modifier that can provide you, right? All right, then. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's start with opening a new Blender file. So we'll go File, New, General, right? Sorry, File, New, General. Let's don't save. We don't need anything that's there in here right now, so I'm just gonna hit A to select everything and delete them out of my scene, right? So the very first thing that we'll do is we'll add the text that we would want to animate. So to do that, just press Shift A, then click on text. The text comes up. So now just hit Tab, and it lets you edit the text. So I'm just gonna type my channel's name here. Edit, and I'll hit Tab again just to come out of that edit mode, right? Now, to go to the text settings, there is this A symbol that you see here. This symbol only appears when you're working with text, right? So just click on this. The very first thing that will change is under paragraph alignments. Just make sure that both of these are in center, just to make sure that we have it center aligned, and like it makes it easier to look at how our text is coming about, right? So the very first thing I'll do is I'll rotate it on x-axis on at 90 degrees. So I'll press RX90, and it just comes up straight, and it's a better uh, visual for me to make edit. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is I'll move it on the z-axis. For that, I'll press G and Z or Z, and then just move it up a little bit. Because I just want it a little bit above the axis, right? So uh, once I'm done with that, let's go to the geometry tab. Actually, even before that, let's go ahead and select a font for our text, right? So uh, when you click on font, you get these options here. So all you have to click on is hit open font. There should be a lot of pre-installed fonts in your computer, but if you don't have it, you can just simply go to like Google it and download a font from there, right? It's as easy as that. There are a lot of fonts available. Some of them are also what do you say uh, available uh, you does not basic you don't get a copyright on those. So those kind of fonts are also available, so just Google them and should be able to find a lot of them. So just choose a good one here, and let's see. I'll go with this. Yeah, this looks pretty okay. All right. The second thing we'll do is we'll click on geometry, and can you see this extrude? We'll extrude it for 0.25. I think should do. Yes, this looks good enough. Let me just bring it. Yeah, 0.25 is good enough extrusion, and then we'll add some depth into it. What does depth do? Depth is basically bevels, right? So what it does is that these hard edges that you see over here, it will just go ahead and add a bevel in there so that it's not looking that awkward, right? So anything in the real world does not really have a completely straight edge. So for that, this helps out. So I'll just put a 0.1. Oh, that's too much. So 0.01. Yeah. Now as you can see that those hard edges automatically has gotten smooth, right? And you can change the number of bevels that you are applying over there just by changing the resolution here, right? So I'll just put 3. I think that's good enough. Now once we are done with this, we will have to go ahead and convert this into mesh, because the animation doesn't apply on the text. So in order to do that, we'll click on object, click on convert, and then mesh. And as soon as we do that, now you can see that it's once you hit tab, it doesn't really give you an option to edit it. It just directly gives you all those vertices and everything that it will do for a normal mesh, right? Or a normal object. Now just make sure that you are happy with your text and how it looks before you even convert it into a mesh, because once you do that, you won't be able to edit it. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to separate all of these texts, because if it's together, it's not going to look that good. So to separate that, I'll hit A again to select everything, and hit P for Papa, P, and then set by loose part, right? We'll separate them by loose part. So what does that mean? It basically means that anything that is not connected to each other, it's going to be separated into a different object. The downside of this is that for these text objects, there are a few other things that are not connected to each other. Like for example, this different parts. So you have to spend some time to make sure that we are joining them into one single object. And to do that, it's really simple. You just select the objects that you want to join, right? Like this, and then hit Control J. And as soon as you do that, now you can see that it's one object. It's we no longer have it in different parts, right? So I have to repeat this process for all of these text. I'll probably speed it up, but yeah, let's see if we can do it faster. All right, so we are done joining them. I'll just go ahead and rename these texts, and I'll tell you why I'm doing that. Because once we actually split them up, it will actually become a little bit easier to identify which is a part of what, right? So let me just quickly rename this. To do that quickly, all you have to do is press F2, and then just basically the dialog box comes up that helps you rename it, right? Okay, I think we have renamed everything. Okay, so the next step is to make sure that we have some even geometry here, and we're going to need that to split them up into different parts, right? So if you don't do that, you'll just get a looking weird looking shape, even if you separate them, right? So to do that, we'll have to come to our object data properties tab, which is this 3 dots into a triangle. You click on this and click on remesh. Can you see this option here, voxel sizes and voxel remesh? So change the voxel size to 0.009. That worked really well for me. So stick to it if you want to use the numbers that I'm using, or you can just experiment with it. Just make sure that you don't go way too low with it. Like if you go to 0.001, it'll just crash your PC. Because what it does is this, right? So if I click on voxel remesh here and hit tab, now if you can see that it automatically has split it into quads. And yeah, it just makes sure that it has even geometry, plus it also takes care of the subdivision piece of it, right? So we're going to repeat this process for every text that we have here. So let's quickly do that. All right, so we are done with that. Once we are done doing the remesh for each text, we'll do a right click and shades mode just to make sure that we are eliminating any kind of unevenness from our structure, right? So uh, now before we carry out the next step, just make sure that you're saving your project, because I've been burned too many times. Like I lost my project. What do you say, like twice before I was able to make the animation that you saw earlier, right? Because I didn't save it like an idiot. So just make sure that you save your project, because the next step is actually going to be tasking on your computer. So just to ensure that we are not losing our progress so far, right? Now, before we do that, there are two things that you need to take care of. The first would be go to edit, go to preferences, go to your add-ons. Now look for cell fracture, right? This is the add-on that we are going to use to create those cracks, and it's really important that you enable it. It comes with Blender, so you don't have to download it from anywhere. You just go on add-ons and it's available there, right? And the second thing that we'll do is we'll also enable the node wrangler add-on. Now this one we're going to need when we are actually texturing it. Okay, so just make sure that those two add-ons are enabled, and just select all of these. The very first thing I'll do is I'll click on set origin to geometry, just to make sure that every origin, like the origin of each text, is within itself, right? Like this dot that you see at the center of the text, that's the origin point. Originally it was over here, I think, and once we did that, it got separated for each object. So once that is done, you select all of your objects and press F3 and just type cell for cell fracture. And once you click on that, this dialog box appears over here, right? So I'll tell you the settings that I used, but remember that the higher you go with the source limit, the longer it's going to take and the more chances are there of your system crashing, right? I'll be going with 100 because I think my system can handle that. I'll increase the noise to 1 and just make sure it's selected to own particles, right? I'll increase the noise to 1 and the recursion to 1. Now, once I'm done with that, I'll hit OK and let it do its work. Just gonna be a while before it actually is able to do that, because right now what it's doing is it's splitting each of those particles, each of those texts into about 100 different objects. As you can see towards your right, it's already creating multiple objects for each text, right? So it's gonna take a while before it completes. So let me just speed up this process too. All right, it seems like we are done with our separation. So we will now just make sure that you're not clicking anywhere else. Just make sure all your objects are selected and click on M, click on new collection, and we'll type new text, just name it new text, right? And hit OK. And as soon as I do that, all these new objects that are created are just going to be put into that collection, right? So now we can just unselect that. Now these are our original text. They are still there in case we need it. But what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and hide them, because I don't really need them in my scene, right? So I'll hide them, but we'll keep them just in case. In case we mess up, we can come back to this and just start from scratch, right? Now, you would have to just look at this and make sure that there are no unwanted objects in there. Like for example, these, just gonna go ahead and delete them because they just look ugly, right? Once we are done with that, just select all of these objects. So I'll just hit Control A to select all of them. We'll do origin to geometry again, just to make sure that everything's in the center. And then click on this transform pivot point and select individual origins and press S. And you can just press Shift just to make sure that you're not doing, like, you're not scaling it too much, because we just want to scale it slightly just to go ahead and give that effect of the letters being cracked, right? So yeah, I think this looks pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we'll just go ahead and start shading. So let's go to the shading tab. I'll just close these unwanted sections. Okay, now select any of these objects, hit that full stop or the period key on your numpad, and it just takes you to that object so that I can focus it. I want something that, okay, I think this one is a good one. So we'll go ahead and hit new. Once we do that, we get our normal principal VSDF. We will also need an emission shader, so I'll quickly add that. And then the next thing I'll add is the mech shader, right? So let's add the mech shader here. We'll take the principal VSDF and add it here. We'll take the emission shader, add it at the top, and take the shader and add it into the surface, right? So once we do that, you can see it's already glowing, but we don't want the emission to be applied everywhere. We just want it to be reflective. So if you've seen my previous video for AK117, it's the same concept of creating the texture, where we are only going to create the highlights at the edges of each object, right? So the next thing we're going to add is color ramp, and we'll take this color ramp, like color input from the color ramp, and add it to the factor. And let's make sure that we are flipping it. And the next thing we'll do is we'll add a layer weight node here, right? And take the facing input and add it to the factor of your color ramp. Now, as you can see, it's already giving you that effect, but we don't want it too much, so we're just going to reduce it and bring it somewhat here, right? Now, I know it doesn't look like much, but it's just giving us that slight effect that we want. So let's do that, and let's increase the emission strength to about 50. And also make sure that you're going to your render settings and like checking on ambient occlusion. What it does, it adds the shadow or reflects the shadow, and just give a little bit more ambience to your scene, right? So ambient occlusion, bloom's gonna make sure that your emission is showing some light in your scene, and then screen space reflections. This will reflect your light on different objects, right? So once we have selected all these three, now the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and select our emission shader and add another color ramp here, right? So we'll go to converter, add a color ramp, and take the color input and connect it to the color input of the emission shader. The next thing we're going to add is a gradient texture. So we'll go to texture, we will go to texture, we'll go to gradient texture. We'll take the color input and add it to the factor, right? And now we're going to use that node wrangler add-on that we enabled earlier. We'll hit Control T, and it gives us these two nodes here, which is the texture coordinate node and the mapping node, right? Now we are going to be working with the UV mapping, but before we do that, we have to unwrap our object. So select the object, hit Control A, or just hit A, sorry, and click on Tab, click A, hit A again, then click on U and Smart UV Project. Now, since it's a lot of objects here, it's gonna take a while to do that, but we kind of need this to make sure that our textures are looking good. So I'm gonna hit OK. Let's give it a minute to get completed. All right, seems like we are done. Okay, once that is done, we will go ahead and create another effect on this light that you're seeing here, right? So let's bring this out a little bit so we can see that effect a little bit more. So I'll add a texture, a noise texture here. I'll take the factor and add it to the blend. And as you can see that the noise is already getting applied, right? So I'll just reduce it to about 2, let's say 3. Yeah, increase the detail a little bit, increase the roughness and distortion to 2. Now it looks reasonably good. Now let's go ahead and change the color of the gradient texture. It just doesn't look that great right now. So I'll change it to something near to orangish color, and change the option here to easing, right? Now, the closer you bring this, the better your texture is gonna look like. So I'll just move it a little bit. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. It's connected to the UV mapping already. And do we want to connect this to the same vector? Let's see. This helps. I mean, it does, but it doesn't look that great. So I'm just gonna remove this. It looks okay here. So let's apply this texture to every other object that's available here. So we'll click on A again. Now click Control L. You get this dialog box here, and just click on Link Material. Right, as soon as you do that, it's applied to everything in your scene, and yeah, it looks pretty amazing so far. The second thing that we're gonna make is we'll add some texture to this original object over here as well, right? Not the highlights. So let's change it to a metallic texture. Oops. Yeah, metallic texture, and let's make it specular, like increase the specularity of it. And I'll just add a little bit more detail to it, right? So for that, I'll go textures, I'll go brick texture. Now take the color input in the brick texture and add it to normal. And it's not gonna do a lot, but just to make sure that we are getting the desired input, we're gonna add a bump node in between, right? And take the color and add it to the height of that bump node, and also just ensure that we are reducing the strength to 0.8 and hit. Well, actually, there's no need to do Control T again. We can just use the same mapping node that is there before. So I'll take that and I'll add it over here. Yeah, as you can see, the texture is already applied. If you increase the size of it, you can see a lot more edges here, right? Okay, so yeah, I'll reduce the color to a little bit more darker side, because it being light wasn't looking that great, right? So I'll take the color input and also apply it to the roughness side, just to make sure that some sides are rough and some are not. I think it looks good enough to go ahead and move on to a next step, right? So once we are done with this, now it's too dark in our render scene, right? So we want to add some light to our scene. For that, I've already downloaded an environment texture, and if you don't know where to get it from, you can just simply go to hdrihaven.com, and it's just available for free over there, right? So let me just quickly go to my environment texture and just bring it in. Now I don't want this background because it just looks awful. So I'll go ahead and go to my render settings, go to film, and click on transparent. As soon as I do that, it's still reflecting light in my scene, but it's just not going to be rendering the background in there, right? So it's a pretty useful option when you use your HDRIs. So once I have this ready, I'll go ahead and add, actually before we add our camera in, let's do something else. So we'll click on Control A once again, and click on Object, Rigid Body, and Add Active. Now this is what is actually going to give it the ability to go ahead and scatter the way we saw in the animation, right? But right now, if I just do it, it will just fall down because, well, that's there is gravity in our scene, right? So how Blender works is that it works with original physics that's there in the world. Like it creates an illusion for that physics, right? So want to make sure that we are excluding the gravity from our scene so that it just don't simply fall down. Uh, and yeah, the next thing that we'll do, like for example, if we uncheck the gravity from here, it will not do anything. Oh, okay, this is weird. I didn't expect it to scatter, but that's still a good effect. But in order for it to scatter the way that we want, what we'll have to do is we'll go ahead and add a force in here. So we'll go force and click on force. And just move this a little bit up and let's bring it in the center here. And we'll increase the strength of the force to somewhat 50. I think that should be good enough to give it the illusion of scattering the way that we want, right? So I'm not gonna run it real time because it's just going to be slowing down my PC a lot. And I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of background noise right now. People are just honking right out my door, which is really weird, but I've got no options. So sorry about all the background noise. I'll try to reduce it as much as I can. Okay, getting back to it. I think this is about it as what we do in Blender. The next step is what we're gonna actually be doing it in Premiere Pro, right? So let me just quickly open that and I'll show you what to do. But before that, let me show you how to render this piece, right? So to do that, go to your render settings. Just in output over here, first of all, just make sure that it's selected to 1080p and the resolution is 100%. Go to your output, go to the folder that you actually want to render it to. So I created a folder for this one. I'll name it version 2. Yep. And change it to FFmpeg video. That's the MP4 video format that we're going to use. And then change this to MPEG-4. We'll click on high quality and go back to the render settings and make sure that it's changing this to very high contrast. What it does, it just gives your gives your scene a very contrasty look. It just looks amazing when you're trying to create cinematic effects, right? So once we are done with that, all you have to do is click on render and render animation. We forgot to add a camera in here. So let's add our camera. Just make sure you select a good view and once you're comfortable with it, just click on Control Alt and 0 on your number pad. And as soon as you do that, it snaps the camera to view. Now it's way too close, so to do that, to bring it back, I'll click on G and the middle button of your mouse and just scroll it front. Don't scroll it, just move your mouse front or back, and it just moves your camera along with it. Now, just to move your camera in any other way, you can just press G and just select the view that you think makes sense. For me, this one does. And once you're done with it, just either press Ctrl F12 or just go to render and render animation. Just wait for your animation to get completed, right? So it takes about for me it took about 2 minutes to complete this. I don't know, it will totally be dependent on how well your computer can handle it and how fast it can do it, right? So I'm just gonna speed this process up and then we'll go into our Premiere Pro steps. Okay, so I'm back. The render is completed and we have the video here. In case you don't know how to add it in the Premiere Pro, it's basically you create your new project, the screen comes up, the editing screen, right? So just double click on this space here and just click on your video that you want to import. just go to that location and import it from there, right? So the only reason we are actually using the Premiere Pro is just to get that reverse effect where it reverses back to its original form, right? I'm not sure if we can do that in Blender. If you know how to do it in Blender, please let me know down below in the comment section. Still learning it, so I'll be happy to get feedback on that. But yeah, the only way I know is through Premiere Pro, so I'm gonna show that in this video, right? So let's quickly go ahead and drag it on to our timeline. This space here is called the timeline, and like you see, the original one is already separating it and pushing it out of our scene, right? So what we'll do is we'll copy this, come to the end of our video, and paste it here, right? Now for this one, we'll right click on speed duration, and just click reverse speed, right? But I want this to be coming back a little faster, so I'll go 400% speed, and I'll click OK. So let's see now. So it's going out of our scene. It's going slow, which is how I want it now, and then it comes back, right? So there's one small thing that we have to do here is that just go towards the very end of your scene and just separate it out. Click on this, click on the separated part, right click, and bring it back to normal. The reason is because bring the speed back to normal, because right now when we were doing it originally, it was not giving us this end structure, right? And that was because it was speeded up. So whenever you speed up a video, it just skips some frame, depending on, just to make sure that it has a smooth transition, right? So now that we have this, we'll right click on it and click on add frame hold. And what it does is basically it creates a frame, like a photo of that frame, and adds it onto your timeline. Now you can just increase it to however you want, basically, which will just give that hold to your animation, right? Stating that once your name is in, then it stays like that for a few frames and then goes away. So I'll add it about here. I think this looks good enough, so let's play it and see. Okay, so it's splitting it up, right? And as you can see, the texture is automatically even lighting up depending on the position of that position of the object, right? So once that is done, now all we have to do is export it. So just hit Control M and export it out to whatever format that you want. So I'll just name it version 3 and maximum render and just export. So it's gonna export out, and then I'll just show you how the final animation looks like. But I guess that's about it for this video. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you guys can use it some way on your channel or in any other way that you think it will make sense. I've made some other animations with it as well. Like for example, this one, it's the same concept. The only thing that I did differently here is I went ahead and joined all the particles together, or else I would have had to individually animate each of them, so which I didn't want to do. So I joined everything together after separating them, and the rest of the thing is the same. So you can create a lot of interesting looking effects just by using the same concept. So I'll be looking forward to your work. If you wanna go ahead and show me what you were able to create, you just make sure to tag me on Instagram. I'm always checking my posts there. You can tag me on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. I'm all available on all possible social media. So we'll be looking forward to your work. All right then. Well, thank you so much for hanging out so far, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.